To have Lucy Frazer with us now. She's the Solicitor General for England and Wales. Hello, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's start with foreign aid. With lots to crack on with. I was listening to Bob Geldof yesterday on the telly, and he was saying Tory voters, quoting him, are essentially prudent, but they're not cruel. This cut is cruel. Why do you think it isn't?
Well, last year, we were the third largest donor globally in terms of international aid. So we really do pay a significant amount to help the world generally. And even without the 0.7% this year, we will be investing £10 billion. And that is really important. But we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it is really important that we support the effort here as well. You know, the Treasury has spent £407 billion. So what we've said is, of course, international aid needs to be spent, but we're going to temporarily cease the 0.7% and bring it back when fiscal circumstances allow.
It is a global pandemic, of course, though. G7 in Cornwall this weekend, all the other G7 countries are not cutting their aid, so why are we?
It is a global pandemic, and we have very much contributed to that effort. So £500 million very early on to support the COVAX scheme. But not just that, it's because of the effort that we put in, the money that we put in to the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Let's talk about vaccines later on. It is a global pandemic. The other G7 leaders are all continuing to pay. We are not. It's going to be very embarrassing for the Prime Minister if he doesn't win this vote when he goes down to the G7 leaders, and he's the only one sitting there saying, oh, sorry, we can't give as much as we used to.
Our starting point is that we are one of the most significant donors to international aid. So as I mentioned, we are the third largest in terms of donors internationally. So our starting point is very high, and we absolutely think that is important, but we have to consider the circumstances that we're in.
But it affects the whole world. You know, the other G7 leaders, I'll put the point again, are not cutting their aid. One could argue that other countries around the world, sub-Saharan Africa and the like, where they need a lot of money from us, they never more so than now. And yet we're saying, sorry, we can't do that for now. Charity starts at home. We were one of the first countries to commit to the 0.7%.
So why
get rid of it?
Well, our international effort isn't just about giving money through international aid. So I've mentioned the vaccine, but it's not just that. It's also about Boris Johnson's leadership, where he said already in relation to the vaccine that we must ensure that the whole world gets the vaccine by the end of 2022. And we're
going to give that away, are we, as opposed to giving it away at cost?
We've committed to 100 million doses.
At cost or giving it away?
Well, we've committed to £2 billion worth of jabs over the course of this year and next.
Are we giving it away, or are we giving it away at cost?
Well, we've committed to £2 billion worth of jabs, and I'm not sure whether that is at cost or whether that is in relation to the jabs that will go out.
My understanding is that it's at cost and not for free.
Can I just come in on that point? Because it is really important to say the reason that the whole world and developing countries are getting it at cost is because of our investment as a country into the AstraZeneca vaccine in the first place. So that's a massive effort that we've put in already.
Is it true that the Chancellor's been he's so worried about potentially losing this vote today, the amendment to the vote, that he's been ringing Conservative MPs over the weekend?
I don't know what the Chancellor's been doing or hasn't been doing. The Chancellor hasn't rang me, but when there's any...
He can count on your vote, I'm guessing.
Well, he can count on my vote in relation to this matter, because I think it is really important that we spend money at home at this time of the pandemic. But it is usual, of course, for ministers to take the temperature of backbenchers and to talk to them to understand their concerns.
Talking about taking temperatures, there'll be a lot of that going on at schools today as the kids go back. A lot of them, I heard Mr Hancock say yesterday, should have had their lateral flow test before they went back to school. The way to get around that is for the kids to have their vaccines, 12 to 15-year-olds. When's that going to be?
Well, the position that we're in at the moment is that the medicine regulator has determined that it is safe and effective for children to use the vaccine, and that's great news. And the next step is that the government has already asked the Joint Committee on Vaccinations and Immunisations to advise us on whether we should have a national rollout of the vaccine for 12 to 17-year-olds.
Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I await to see what the JCVI say. We have taken their advice throughout the pandemic, and I'm sure we will take their advice on this as well.
Freedom Day, 21st of June, is that going ahead?
Well, we will be looking at the data, and it is really important to look at the data before we make a decision. And the data that we'll be looking at is, the vaccination rate, the hospitalisation rate, the death rate, as well as the number of variants that we have in the country at the time.
Listening to Matt Hancock yesterday, it sounded as though it's less likely than it was.
Well, we'll look at the data, and there's a week to go before we'll be making a determination about June the 21st. So what the data is showing us at the moment is that the level of infections are going up, but that isn't translating into hospitalisations in the way that it did in the other waves. So that's good news, but we have to keep looking at the data.
You do look at the data, but we always know that it's the politicians that make the decision in the long run, and there's all sorts of considerations that you have to make, not least those pesky rebel MPs on your backbenches who will not be at all happy if you push this Freedom Day back any further. I suppose the Prime Minister has to take all of that into account as well, does he? Well,
the Prime Minister has to look at the data in relation to the situation on the ground in terms of health. That's hospitalisations, the vaccine rollout, all the other things I mentioned, but it also has to look at the economy
and the politics of
it, and the impact on business and on people's lives. I'm sure that the Prime Minister will be listening to backbenchers, as he will be listening to a variety of people, but really these decisions will be made on relation to the data.
Two other questions, if I may. As far as President Biden is concerned, he's coming down to the G7 in Cornwall on Friday, Saturday. He has said that unless the deal for Northern Ireland, as far as Brexit is concerned, is sorted out, it's an absolute mess at the moment. In fact, we heard from the Brexit minister saying that the government underestimated the effects of the Northern Ireland Protocol on goods movements, that there will not be a deal between the US and the UK on trade. How could you not have seen this coming? You were warned by 3 former prime ministers, and indeed George Mitchell, who put together the Northern Ireland Agreement, and the CBI as well. They all said, this is going to be a problem. Only now is the Brexit minister saying, looks like it's a bit of a problem. And the American president is saying, get it sorted.
Well, Lord Frost is absolutely trying to get it sorted, and he was in Ireland last week doing exactly that. It is very difficult on the ground in terms of trade, it is important that we ensure that we do have trade between the UK and Ireland, between England and Ireland, and it is really important that we saw that, and Lord Frost is doing exactly that.
But you understand that it does look as though you underestimated the complexities of this agreement.
Well, as it has panned out on the ground, it is more difficult than we anticipated, and we do need to sort out that trade arrangement, and that is what Lord Frost is doing.
So you weren't really listening when 3 former Prime Ministers, George Mitchell and the CBI, amongst others, were saying this isn't going to work?
I think we've listened the whole way through, but we have untangling our relationship with Europe, which we had for over 40 years, was obviously going to be difficult.
It was an oven-ready deal.
It was always going to be difficult, and no one underestimated the problems in relation to that, and we need to sort them out.
OK. Just want to ask you about this dating app story that I've been reading about today. So apparently you are going to advertise on dating apps to get more people to have jabs. Is that right? Is it going to say something like mature male with sense of humour, all his own teeth, 2 good hips, looking for long strolls in the open air with potential life partner, must have 2 jabs?
Well, what we know, and the reason this is really important, is that 59% of people would prefer to date someone who'd been vaccinated. We know that the vaccine is having an effect. As I mentioned, it's breaking that chain between infections and hospitalisation. So getting your jab is really important. And if putting this on a dating app helps encourage that rollout, then that's a great thing.
You nearly smiled. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning working on that gag. It's lovely to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.